Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of College and Career Pathways, where every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday we provide you with information on various colleges and universities, financial aid resources, skilled trade professions, technical schools, training opportunities, employment opportunities, and career readiness skills, all to provide you with um, an opportunity to make the best career decisions possible. I'm Tony Cureton, your host, and we are with, once again, Michigan Student Aid, the Department of Treasury, and they are going to talk about the FAFSA application and financial aid, because those of you that are interested in continuing your education, whether you go to college or a training program or technical school, many of these programs, they have financial aid assistance. So we're here to help you get well-versed in this so that you can put your application in and get some funding for the fall semester. Felicia, welcome. We're so glad to have you back.
Hi, and thank you for having me. So happy to be here. Thanks for Tony.
Good deal. You can go ahead and get started.
All right, perfect. So as Tony had introduced me, my name is Felicia Pell. I am from the state of Michigan's, well, we like to say my student aid, abbreviate it, but the government and how it has layers and all these official names. So we also go by Office of Post-Secondary Financial Planning within the state of Michigan's Treasury Office, if you want to be really technical about it. But however, I am here to talk about financial aid, making it college accessible, affordable, and attainable. So follow along here with my presentation. Hopefully you can see it. And today I'm going to talk about pretty much financial aid 101. As Tony had mentioned, I'm going to talk about the FAFSA, but I'm going to talk about a lot of things around the FAFSA, such as institutions that you should hopefully be considering, the types of financial aid that all stem from point bullet 3, the FAFSA, federal programs and state programs that stem from completion of the FAFSA. So essentially without completing it, you can't even be considered for any of these funds. So that's kind of how serious that FAFSA application is. MISSG, which is my office. So another thing we go by is my student aid, student scholarships, grants, and outreach. And then scholarships that are available. I'll talk about that kind of sprinkled in within the whole presentation, but I'll talk very specifically about some resources that we have to help you on your scholarship search, and then Q&A after if you guys are wanting that. I'm also gonna turn off my camera just for the reason of knowing that sometimes it helps with reducing computer lag and all that good stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and continue on. And like I said, I'm just gonna be stopping my camera for the purposes of making sure my internet is going well. All right. So what institutions are you considering, or hopefully who you are considering or should be considering? So first and foremost, community colleges, then public colleges or universities, and then private colleges or universities. And I would even consider those probably out of state colleges and universities as well, because your price is going to be similar. So my main 3 bullet points on each, the first one you'll notice is the cost of attendance. That's what COA stands for. Average COA, cost of attendance. So that's what a school or college believes it costs for a student to attend there for its academic year. And keep in mind that an academic year is only 9 months usually, whereas a true year, annual year, right, is 12 months. So it's going to be the same period of time as you've been going to school throughout all of your grade school. So pretty much from August through May, sometimes early June, just all depends on that college or university. And then sometimes that semester, or not semester, but that academic year can be a little different as well as to when it truly officially starts. So that can vary by a few months, but regardless, it's usually about 9 months. So when it comes to your community colleges, more often than not, you're just thinking about tuition and fees, books and supplies, and maybe some transportation costs if they have, a high commuting population, which most do. However, some community colleges, such as my alma mater, which is Jackson College, where I got my associates in business administration. There you will find that they actually have housing. They have campus housing, because unless you are familiar with the area, me being a native, I know that kind of like Detroit. And, for those of you that are familiar with Detroit, you'll know what I mean. But Detroit is very big. So, people that aren't even really in the city of Detroit say, hey, I'm from Detroit, right? And there are lots of counties surrounding and within Detroit, right? So many. That's why it's so questionable. Like, am I in Detroit or am I not in Detroit? Chicago is similar too, right? It's just such a dense population with lots of counties. So Jackson, I was surprised to learn, is actually considered a large city, even though I feel like we're a speck on the map. But regardless, Vandercook is really where that college is, even though it says it's Jackson College. Before it updated to Jackson College, it was Jackson Community College, but it is in Vandercook Lake, which is actually a county outside of Jackson, but still they count it as, people in there say we're from Jackson, even though they're right outside of it, really. And it's in the boonies. There's not a great transportation system, so they've got housing. So if that's important to you, pay attention to those things, because that's going to significantly change that cost of attendance. So if you're looking at, someplace like Schoolcraft, for example, which doesn't have housing, the cost of attendance is probably going to be lower versus being, a little bit higher when it has to include that housing cost for those 9 months. And then keep in mind, if you are somebody that plans on living on your own, right? You're moving out and you're not going to go back home in the spring, summer. You've got to consider that this cost of attendance is actually going to be larger for you. Just speaking from personal experience, I went to Eastern Michigan University. I honestly do not remember off the top of my head what my cost of attendance was when I was attending there, but I will tell you that I was somebody that didn't move back home over the summer. So from Jackson to Ypsilanti, that's about 45 minutes. So I could have easily went back home, but I didn't want to. Plus I had a full-time job that I was able to attain in the summertime. However, I didn't realize that I had to attend school still in order to stay in their housing. And so that was kind of hard for me, right? So I had to go part-time. I ended up taking summer classes, and I ended up going online. I want to say, yeah, I did do fully online. I was able to do that, but it was still like a lot of work, working full time and then taking summer classes, which are usually accelerated. So it was 6-7 weeks when normally a regular semester is 15-16 weeks for a class length. So just to give you some perspective. And so it's more expensive, as you'll see there, and that's because housing is usually an expectation with a public university or college. So Eastern, University of Michigan, Central, Michigan State, those kinds of schools you're going to notice that cost of attendance in comparison is almost doubled. If it has doubled for the purposes of room and board, which board is food, that's what's going to be included in your cost of attendance. Now, if you're thinking that you're just going to need a 2 years or less in terms of how long you think you'll be in college or want to be in college, that's going to be your community college. That's where you get your certificate, your licensing programs, or your associates. But when you think you're going to go in for longer than an associate's degrees, that's usually when you're looking at your public college or university. Now, there are some schools that offer associate's degrees, but that is kind of expensive when you think about it, living on campus to obtain your associate's degree. Still not saying that you can't do it, just saying that it's going to be more expensive if you notice here with that cost of attendance. And as I mentioned, sometimes they're offered, but most common, you're thinking about getting your bachelor's degree, which is 4-year degree. Some people can do it in like 3.5 when you're just full-time trucking it, going constant school. But then you might be thinking too about your graduate, like your master's degree. And that's often even an MBA, right? A master's in business administration is what that is. I got my master's of arts in organizational leadership, actually just a few months ago from Siena Heights University, which is a private college or university. They actually are surprisingly significantly less, I would say, when it comes to that cost of attendance. Now, I don't want to say significantly less because it may not be for everybody. I know I had some support from my employer at the time, which wasn't actually the state of Michigan at the time. However, They allow for students to get associate, bachelor's, and graduate programs. The benefit is that typically sometimes they'll have shorter programs offered, or you can get through it in some kind of accelerated fashion. The attraction I had to their program was the fact that it was all online, that I was able to do it online the entire time. And so again, right, when it comes to cost of attendance, they're thinking about students that may have to live and survive while going to school full time. Luckily, I had the benefit and privilege of having that financial support and being able to work at the same time. But that may not always be the case. So that's where you've got to think about these various benefits of why are you choosing the school? Because as I mentioned, out of state is going to be this significant. For example, I worked at the University of Michigan. So for example, them as a private public college or university, it's about $30,000 for our in-state students. But students coming from outside of the state of Michigan at the University of Michigan is $55,000 for the cost of attendance. And the difference is literally only the tuition and fees. Okay, everything else is consistent and constant and the same. It's literally the fact that as an in-state student and you attending an in-state K through 12 essentially institution, that's public funding that was invested in you for attending here. Your parents having a home, purchasing vehicles, paying state taxes on all of those things. You know, if we have boats and any other toys that we have, all those things we pay into state taxes. That's why we need these titles and all these registrations for them. And that essentially comes back to you and your family as a discount to your local public university or college. Okay. And so that's why when you go out of state, it's that much more expensive because you're going there and you're getting essentially what their people invested into so that they got their equivalent discount. So that's just how they make it fair and right in the world. But those are the things that you want to consider if you're going to go, which one you're going to go to and why. But I want you to keep in mind too, that the quality of your education does not change based on which type you go to. Okay. Yes, some have their reputations and things like that. But the greatest example I would have is like your doctors and nurses. At the end of the day, when you go to them and you're sick, you're not asking them before you get service, what school did you go to? And how'd you obtain your education? And what was your grades, your GPA? And, you know, you better been cum laude, you know, before you graduated, right? And I'm not saying don't be your best or don't do your best, but I'm just saying that at the end of the day, no one knows, you know, where you got your education from, as long as it's accredited and legitimate and that employer hired you. So how financially responsible you were with purchasing and getting that education will actually do you better in the long run, just an FYI. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the sources of financial aid that can support you in terms of getting your education. Okay, there's a lot out there. The federal government, which is why that FAFSA is necessary, the state government, which is where I hail from now, but they, again, will depend on that FAFSA. The institutions, so the colleges or universities that you're applying to, they've got their own funding to help you. And again, a lot of them are going to require that FAFSA. Without it, they may not consider you for a lot of funds. And so you'll automatically be self-selecting out from all that can be available to you. And then there's private and third party. So as I had mentioned earlier, I had the privilege of my employers being able to support some of my education as I went along, especially when it came to my master's degree, because there's really not a lot of funding for people getting their graduate and beyond. But when you're getting your undergrad, such as your bachelor's and below, there are tons of funds out there to support you. So be sure to take advantage of any associations that you or your family is a part of, any foundations, whether that's your community foundation, anything with the word foundation might have a scholarship associated. So just keep your ears peaked for that now that you go about your day-to-day life. Various clubs, if you're a part of any, or your parents or family members, sometimes they have different scholarship opportunities available. Employers, so that's where I had mentioned, right? My employer assisted me with my education. But keep in mind, I want you to keep in mind too, the difference. There's scholarships that you can get from your employer, as well as there's tuition reimbursement or tuition assistance that you can get from your employer, as well as your parents could get from their employer for you. So make sure they ask what tuition assistance, reimbursement, or scholarships that are available. Scholarships are free aid, which I'm going to go in and elaborate about, but usually tuition assistance or reimbursement, some places will provide it to their employees free and clear up to a certain amount. However, some will have the caveat that they owe time for however much they end up paying. A good example is a friend of mine shared that if they had gotten support from a previous employer, for every 12 credits that employer paid, they would owe them 24 months of work or service. And even though they had worked there for, I think, 5 years up at that point, it wasn't retroactive. So it wasn't counting what they already had worked. It's no, now that we've paid for this time, it's now the clock is ticking. Okay. And so if you don't think you'll stay at that employer, it may not be smart to take any support from them. And luckily that was how the direction my friend went in, and they went with a new employer that helped in a different, better way. So just keep that in mind on what you're agreeing to, because everything kind of often has a cost associated with it. So just be mindful to ask what that cost is. Churches often will have their congregation will put together a scholarship of some sort. So I actually provide this presentation often as the financial literacy component to be eligible and or maintain the scholarship the church provides. So keep that in mind as well. They also will ask for Fafsa confirmation emails or pages to confirm that you're doing everything you can to find money before they give you their money. So again, even the smaller places are still requiring the Fafsa before they say yes to giving you some money. Unions, if your parents or family members are a part of any unions, they often have scholarships for friends and family members. And then when I say etc. here, I'm saying anywhere you live, work, eat, or play. If there's money exchanged, ask, is there a scholarship here? Do you guys have a scholarship application? And they'll be able to usually tell you something, like McDonald's, Wendy's, Taco Bell, all these places have scholarships. So you just got to go look, and you can even Google Wendy's/scholarship or, Wendy's scholarship or whatever. All right, so the types of financial aid. Free money, as I mentioned, the scholarships earlier. So merit-based. Typically when we think merit-based, we're thinking merit-based, like I have to have a high GPA, have high SAT scores or test scores and things of that nature. But I say also to think about meritorious behavior as well, right? So if you've got certain character elements to yourself that people have mentioned to you over the years that maybe you don't think so highly of yourself because it's just a natural trait, right? Like for example, being really dependable. Maybe somebody has said to you, man, you're always dependable, or girl, you're always dependable. Or they say, you take great initiative. I really appreciate that about you. Those are meritorious behaviors. Maybe sometimes that can be sometimes a strength that you have, which is why, unfortunately, and fortunately at the same time, you could be lacking in the academic area. Because I think back to even some of my earliest feedback from some of my employers, which I always thought, but one of them was that I spent too long with customers. And so I think to myself, like, well, while they had the complaint that I spent too much time with customers, all my customers, I always had the best reviews. I always had repeat customers. They always wanted to see me. They always requested me if they came back. So I've always had very strong customer relationships, and that was also noted. So while that was a kind of a hand slap when it came to my review, it was also something that was highly recognized whenever my reviews came along as well. So it's like, I feel like my boss has always said, I can't give you a perfect review, so I have to hit you somewhere. It's kind of always what their language was to me, was that, you're doing great, but I can't just give you all A's, which, is the unfair part of life. But keep your ear out for any of those things that, you're just not giving yourself credit for, if that makes sense. Because it's those areas that we're often the strongest and that come most natural to us. And maybe it's asking, your friends or family members, if there's something that they like about you, and that can be a nice launching point. Because also to keep in mind too, with those scholarship or those various essays for applications, are very similar to scholarship essays. So keep those, put those in a Word document and save them, because you could just be, just a few words and exchanges away from submitting a scholarship essay and not having to redo an entire work from scratch, but being able to, copy and paste some paragraphs, add some sentences, and really bulk it up. Now, grants, again, are need-based. And so those are determined based on the FAFSA. So no one anywhere that offers a grant will offer their grant unless they recognize the FAFSA has been completed first. And that's why it's in that free money category, because they give it to you based on seeing that even the FAFSA, or based on the school you attend and what the FAFSA says, whether or not you have need. And I'll have a video that'll explain that further, what need is. And then there's earned money, which is work study. Part-time employment that helps you pay with your for your college expenses. I'll elaborate further because I have a slide just dedicated to that. And then borrowed money, those are loans. Unfortunately, some of the videos I do have will sound a little bit salesy when it comes to loans, because it's the federal government's, video. They don't want it to sound so negative when it comes to loans. And I know that loans are kind of negative in the scope of the world today, but I want you to know that it is a part of the financial aid picture. So when you go to the financial aid office, loans are something that will be offered on an award letter, which will be further discussed as well later. But keep in mind too that loans do need to be repaid with interest, and that you have the option of accepting or declining your student loans, as well as any form of aid here. And that is important to consider whether you'll earn enough after college to pay that loan off and have a manageable debt, which I'm going to discuss later on as well. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the FAFSA, but I'm actually going to mostly show you that this is what the FAFSA page looks like, except I think today they updated this background. So it has like some students with backpacks and, books in their hands and things like that, getting ready to go to college. But this is essentially what it looks like. And it's usually a long page here. And I also have a video that I now want to share that's going to elaborate on some of the information that we were talking about here. Give me one moment as I change over. And if sound is a thing, just be mindful that you can control the sound on your side. So I just want you to be mindful of that if the video is loud. I do apologize in advance.
If you're interested in financial aid for college or career school, you're going to need to fill out the free application for Federal Student Aid, or FAFSA. It takes most people about 30 minutes to complete online, and the best part, it's 100% free, and it provides you with access to grants, loans, and work-study funds from the federal government. And many colleges and states use FAFSA information to provide their own college or state financial aid. Before you fill out the FAFSA, it's a good idea to create your FSA ID, a username and password that lets you electronically sign your FAFSA and gives you access to various websites related to federal student aid. And here's an important tip. If your parent is providing information on your FAFSA, he or she will need his or her own FSA ID. Visit studentaid.gov/FSA ID for more information. Your FAFSA can be completed online at fafsa.gov, and help is provided throughout the online application process. You will need to fill out the FAFSA each year you are in school because your financial situation may change. Plus, you may be able to automatically transfer your tax data from the IRS, making the application even quicker to fill out. Each state and college or career school sets its own deadline for the FAFSA, so it's best to get it done early. Since some of the funds are available on a first-come, first-served basis, you don't want to miss out. Now that you know about the FAFSA, you might be asking, well, how much money will I get? Your college or career school will do the math, and there's a simple formula that they use. First, the college takes your cost of attendance, which is the total amount it will cost you to go to that school. Your cost of attendance will vary from school to school. Then, the college subtracts your expected family contribution, or EFC. Your EFC is based on information provided in your FAFSA and will not change based on the school you attend. However, the EFC is not necessarily the amount of money you will have to pay. Basically, your cost of attendance minus your EFC equals your financial need. Your college uses your financial need and other information to determine how much financial aid you can receive. See? Pretty simple. If you have questions or need more information, please visit studentaid.gov.
All right, hopefully you can see the financial aid. Hold on. Yep. The financial aid screen here. All right, perfect. Okay, and just to kind of summarize some quick facts from the video about the FAFSA. So the FAFSA can be completed online and through the mobile app. I actually have had a handful of students and families complete it through the mobile app, actually during these presentations. So just know you can do that through the Google Play or App Store. And then also avoid being scammed, because the FAFSA, that acronym itself, stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So if anyone's trying to get you to pay for it, run the other way, because it is free and no one can get you more money, because at the end of the day, the financial aid office is going to do their process. And at the end of the day, they are following the federal government's regulations, and anything they need will correct anything that someone tried to do to get you more money that was inaccurate or unethical. It does have to be completed every single year. And for the state of Michigan, our deadline is March 1st. So essentially getting that completed as early as possible gets you in the line for first come, first served priority. So for those of you that are seniors, you're working on getting the current FAFSA completed, which is the 22-23 FAFSA. It'll use 2020 tax information. And then next year, you're going to do the 23-24 FAFSA using the 2021 tax year. And it'll also let you know. So it's not important that you remember which tax year, because when you get into it, it'll ask you if you completed this, that particular tax year. And as the video had mentioned, it'll ask for that FSA ID from you in order to import your tax information, and then the one from your parent in order to import their tax information from irs.gov. That EFC that the video mentioned, the estimated family contribution, they use the cost of attendance, which you saw earlier, ranged anywhere from 12,000 and some change to 55,000 and some change. And then keep in mind, I forgot to mention that those are averages. So that 12,000 something I had on the community college is on average, meaning there are colleges at that amount, above and below that amount. And the same goes for the public and private college amounts that I had up there. So after completing the FAFSA, you're going to get a notification of the estimated family contribution. You're going to see that on the final page, as well as you're going to see that in your estimated, or not your estimated, but your confirmation email. You're going to see this estimated family contribution. And I like to let you know that even though it says estimated family contribution, which just sounds like this is how much they're estimating your family to contribute, this is not the amount that you and your family have to pay up front. It just determines the types of financial aid you're eligible for at that particular college or university. And then the variables that impact the EFC are student and parent income, family household size, number in college, and the amount paid in taxes. So I often get a lot of questions about whether a student can be considered independent, right? Because we're aware that being independent means that you don't have to include parental information. However, the federal government has very clear and stringent requirements on being an independent student. So essentially, if you can't answer yes to those dependency questions, or at least one of them, which is, are you at least 24, married with kids, a graduate student, veteran, member of the armed forces, experienced time in foster care, became emancipated, homeless, or at risk of being homeless, which requires documentation, or are determined by a financial aid administrator, essentially make a student independent, not requiring parental tax information. However, if you're saying no to all those, then you do require parental information. And so real quick, I'm going to share a video on, hold on real quick.
When you fill out the FAFSA
before the presentation, but whenever I click on them, they want to try and like play. So it always takes them just a moment. Okay.
When you fill out the FAFSA, you'll be asked several questions that will determine whether you are an independent or dependent student. This is an important distinction because if you're a dependent student, then you'll need to include your parents' financial information on your FAFSA. This means that your parents' financial information will be considered along with your information to determine your eligibility for federal student aid. So how do you figure out if you're an independent or dependent student? Generally, if you are a graduate student, on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces, a veteran, are married, have children whom you support, or are 24 or older, then you are considered an independent student. If you don't meet any of these criteria, then you're likely considered a dependent student and will have to provide your parents' financial information when completing the FAFSA. If you have a different living situation, including divorced parents or living under the care of a grandparent or other relative, the online FAFSA will provide guidance to help you answer the parent questions. In other special circumstances, your status may not be as easy to determine, and you'll need guidance from the financial aid office at the college or career school you plan to attend. Some common questions that people often ask are, what if the FAFSA tells me I'm a dependent student, but my parents don't claim me on their taxes, or I've moved out of their house and am financially independent? While these situations do arise, they aren't part of the criteria for independent status on the FAFSA, so you would still be required to report your parents' financial information on the FAFSA. What if I'm considered a dependent student but have no contact with my parents or access to their information? There are other options.
You're frozen there, Felicia. Huh. Okay. We're going to see if she can reboot herself.
Is it still going?
No, it stopped.
Oh, okay. My apologies. I was like, suddenly I saw where it was like connecting and I'm like, uh-oh. So then I'm like, I don't know what's happening. Okay. Share my screen. All right. Well, hopefully we don't disappear on each other again.
When you fill out the FAFSA, you'll be asked several questions that will determine whether you are an independent or dependent student. This is an important distinction because if you're a dependent student, then you'll need to include your parents' financial information on your FAFSA. This means that your parents' financial information will be considered along with your information to determine your eligibility for federal student aid. So how do you figure out if you're an independent or dependent student? Generally, if you are a graduate student, on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces, a veteran, are married, have children whom you support, or are 24 or older, then you are considered an independent student. If you don't meet any of these criteria, then you're likely considered a dependent student and will have to provide your parents' financial information when completing the FAFSA. If you have a different living situation, including divorced parents or living under the care of a grandparent or other relative, the online FAFSA will provide guidance to help you answer the parent questions. In other special circumstances, your status may not be as easy to determine, and you'll need guidance from the financial aid office at the college or career school you plan to attend. Some common questions that people often ask are, what if the FAFSA tells me I'm a dependent student, but my parents don't claim me on their taxes, or I've moved out of their house and am financially independent? While these situations do arise, they aren't part of the criteria for independent status on the FAFSA, so you would still be required to report your parents' financial information on the FAFSA. What if I'm considered a dependent student, but have no contact with my parents or access to their information? There are other options available to you in these situations, so it is possible for a dependent student to submit the FAFSA without parental information. If you have indicated on your FAFSA that you cannot contact your parents or access their financial information, you'll need to speak to staff at the financial aid office at the college or career school you plan to attend. The financial aid staff will tell you what to do next. So what if my parents aren't going to help me pay for college and refuse to provide information for my FAFSA? If this is the case, the only federal aid you may be able to receive will be an unsubsidized loan, which is a federal student loan that begins accruing interest as soon as you receive your funds. To find out whether you can get the loan, fill out your FAFSA and then speak to the financial aid staff at the college or career school that you wish to attend. If you have any other questions regarding financial aid, your college or career school will be able to answer them for you, and, if appropriate, make a decision about your dependency status. Their decision is final and cannot be appealed to the U.S. Department of Education. No matter your dependency status, make sure to complete the FAFSA to find out what federal money you can get for college or career school. If you have questions or need more information, please visit.
What they were going to say is go to studentaid.gov
studentaid.
for more information. All right. And let me get Sharon back to my PowerPoint here. Okay. All right. And so typically also students sometimes wonder whose parent or which parent should I use? You know, whose parent information should I use? And so naturally, if your parents are married to each other, you'll put both of their information on the FAFSA. However, you only need at least one parent to complete the FAFSA with you. And so what I mean by that is when it mentioned having one FSA ID, that's all you need in terms of completing the FAFSA is at least one parent to complete it with you. But both of their information in theory, because if they're married, most people file jointly, then both their information would be on there. And then if your parents are legally divorced or separated, you'll use whichever parent has custody over you. That's what custodial parent means. And then when your parent, if that custodial parent gets remarried, so let's say your parent was a single parent and they got remarried recently, then they would use that parent, you would use your parent and that remarried or step parent's information. So parent and step parent's income. And then if your parents were never married and never living together or not living together, then you'd use the parent you live with, the custodial parent. And then if your parents were never married but are living together, then you would use both parents' information, even if they file separately. Backwards on that one. All right, and then there's something known as professional judgment. So this is when a financial aid office or financial aid professional within that office helps the student seek professional judgment based on their special circumstances. And so they're determining the eligibility. A special circumstance can allow a student to get a reevaluated financial aid award package. But in order for you to get that reconsideration or that reevaluation, you have to inquire with financial aid office and see if professional judgment is applicable, because they don't actually have to, they're not required to provide it actually. And so you want to keep that in mind, but if they do provide it, then they have their own rules and policies associated with how to execute it. However, there are ones that the government makes very clear and simple that they can consider, such as change in circumstances, such as change in income, household size. So, income can be due to a divorce, which would change the household size as well, right? One less person, one less income. COVID was an example of that because everyone's income didn't match 2 years ago as of last year. It could be still consistent for some people. And then dependency overrides can happen as a result of family breakdown due to abuse, neglect, or homelessness, which all of course have to be documented. Now, assuming you get through all of that and FAFSA is completed and sent to your schools of choice, these are the federal aid programs that you'd be considered for. There's the federal Pell Grant, Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, Federal Work Study, Teacher Education Assistance for Higher Education Teach Grant, Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant, Federal Direct Subsidized and Unsubsidized Loan, and then for Federal Direct Plus Loan. So keep in mind that anything with the grant on the end of it does not need to be repaid, but federal loan funds do have to be repaid. And so essentially everything from here up doesn't have to be repaid, and then these do. So the federal Pell Grant, it's the largest grant that students are being considered for. And then give me 1 second because I have another video just to kind of discuss
If you need help
on the various types of financial aid.
If you need help paying for college or career school, the Office of Federal Student Aid might be your best option. We offer more than $150 billion to students each year in the form of grants, loans, and work-study funds. And federal student aid can be used to pay for school expenses, such as tuition, room and board, and books and supplies. After you've filled out the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, you'll receive an award letter from each school you list on your FAFSA. This letter explains both the federal and non-federal financial aid options that a school is offering you. So let's talk about federal aid. If you qualify for and receive a federal grant, you won't have to repay the money. That will definitely help offset the cost of school, but you may still need additional help. If so, a federal student loan might be your answer. Remember, a student loan is just like any other loan. It's borrowed money that will have to be repaid with interest. If you plan to take out a loan, consider federal student loans first. Compared to private student loans, federal student loans often have lower fixed interest rates and offer many benefits that you won't find otherwise. For example, when it's time for you to repay your federal student loan, your loan servicer can work with you to find the best repayment plan for your individual needs. Plus, you may be able to adjust your loan payments based on your income. You also may be able to defer your federal loan payments, deduct student loan interest on your taxes, and even consolidate your eligible federal student loans into one loan with one monthly payment. Federal loans can even be forgiven based on certain types of employment. Getting a work-study job is another great option to help pay for school. Eligible undergraduate and graduate students will be able to earn at least minimum wage. If you have questions or need assistance, you can contact the financial aid office at your college
or studentaid.gov is what it would say as well, but we'll go ahead and move on. Okay. So the federal Pell Grant is also one of those that one of the largest federal grants that anyone's considered for, and you have to complete a FAFSA, as you've been hearing this entire time. Now, families making less than 26K automatically receive a 0 EFC, which means that their college-bound student gets the maximum amount of it. Now, that for this year, the maximum amount is $6,495. So if you keep in mind, even at a community college with that average being around 12,000, I think 495, or I think it was more like 12,006. It's this 495 getting stuck in my head. But anyhow, 12,600 and something. This is just half of that equation. So even for somebody that gets the majority of this or all of this, it still has to consider that. Now, from my personal work experience, having worked in multiple financial aid offices, as I alluded to earlier, working at the University of Michigan, I also worked at my alma mater of Jackson College, as well as Schoolcraft College. And this amount is typically good enough to work with paying for tuition and fees for your in-district community college when you're not having to consider or factor in other things. Maybe a little bit of books and supplies in your first year, not so much your second year as they get more expensive, but that's where other scholarships and fundings really come in and the different things that you're getting offered. So federal work study, for example, can also assist in paying for college. So it's part-time employment that helps with college expenses. So typically what it is it's an award, a grant that shows up on your award letter for a specific amount, and it allows you to work up to 20 hours at max a week, because you're a student, you know, that's kind of your first obligation. And then this is kind of your second obligation, but still important. And so as a work study student, you start to gain work experience, references. I can speak from personal experience. That's actually how I got into financial aid in my alma mater, was working in the financial aid office as a work study student, actually in the student services office. So I kind of had multiple areas of experience, as well as you could potentially get this work experience towards what you're actually working towards in terms of a degree. It just all depends on what you plan on doing. You can do that at your community college, your 4-year, as well as your public or private institution. And it's a guaranteed job, but you still have to find the job, apply for it, interview for it, you know, complete a resume or send in one and everything. And it's money that you get as a form of a paycheck to manage as you need. So maybe it helps with that transportation cost, maybe it helps with that food situation, however you need to manage it to help with your educational college expenses. That can be also towards those books and supplies as well, or even tuition for the following semester. And then, as I mentioned, there are federal student loans. I do have one more video for you here. Give me 1 second to transition over. And it's going to discuss responsible borrowing, okay? And then I'm going to go into detail on what the different forms of loans are.
College or career school is an important step in achieving your future goals, and there are many financial aid options to consider. Did you know that a federal student loan can be a great way to help pay for school? After all, a grant, work-study job, or a scholarship can be a huge help, but these forms of aid may not cover the full cost of attending school. So if you decide to take out a federal student loan, it's important to understand what you are getting and be a responsible borrower. Getting a loan is a big decision. You might be paying your loans back for 10 years or more, so take your time to decide. And remember to accept only the loans that you need, because you'll have to repay them once you're out of school. Here are a few things to keep in mind when deciding how much to borrow. Do some research. Make sure that your school is the right fit for you, both educationally and financially. Location, location, location. The amount of money you need to borrow can depend a lot on where your school is located. In-state schools and community colleges may cost less than out-of-state schools. And finally, getting an idea of your future income is also important when deciding how much to borrow. Starting salaries vary greatly depending on your career path, so it's worth thinking about how the amount of your loan will affect your future finances. After all, your student loan payments should be only a small percentage of your salary after you graduate. Once you've decided on your school and figured out how much money you should borrow, you'll need to sign a Promissory Note, which is an agreement to repay your loan. Make sure you keep a copy for your records. If you do take out loans, you'll need to keep in touch with your loan servicer when repayment begins. Your loan servicer will make this easy for you by offering web, email, and phone contact options. If you make this investment in your future, being an informed, responsible borrower can pay off in a big way. If you have questions or need more information, please.
All right. All right, so if you decide to go to especially a public or private or out-of-state college or university, then student loans are going to show up towards the bottom of your award letter. You're going to get offered any kind of grants, scholarships, first grants, then scholarships, and then it's going to offer you some of these subsidized, unsubsidized student loans, and then potentially this plus loan. The subsidized are considered the need-based, and the way I like to remember the difference between the two is subsidized is the government subbing in for you. So they sub in and pay the interest on the school, on the interest, on the loan while you're enrolled in school, at least half time during any grace period. So that's 6 months after you graduate, or during any deferment period, such as this last year, when I think of forbearance just happened for anyone who had a student loan, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. And then there's unsubsidized student loans, where I say the government is not subbing in for you, get unsub. And that means that you're responsible for the interest during all periods of time. So the moment the loan pays towards your student account, you begin to accumulate daily interest. And then when it comes to plus loans, as an undergraduate student, plus loans, the parent is the loan holder, and the loan is in the parent's name and cannot be transferred to the student. So I often suggest that for parent borrowers, or if you see this on your award letter, before your parent has done anything, I would suggest that the parent who has the worser credit apply, simply because then it'll have the option for them to seek a third-party cosigner if their approval is not immediately granted. But what that also translates to is that it unlocks more unsubsidized loan under yourself. It could potentially unlock some subsidized. It just all depends on the cost and expense of that school, but it unlocks some loan eligibility for you to get and to not force your parent to have to borrow on your behalf. And then some factors to consider when taking out a loan. Make sure that your monthly loan payments won't exceed 10% of your take-home pay during your first year after graduation. So go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I think that is bls.gov, and look at those careers that you're looking for, those that you're interested in. Look at what the average or median income is. Median or average means in the middle. As I mentioned with my cost of attendance, it's right in the middle. That means you could start out higher at that amount or lower than that amount. So me estimating in a artificial world of no taxes, 60K if you graduated with in 4 years from now, 60K is 5K a month take home before taxes. And so that shouldn't be more than $500 in terms of a loan payment. And so also your total loan debt shouldn't exceed your first year annual salary after graduation. So if 60K is what you're banking on, then you shouldn't borrow any more than 60K a year. If you can, borrow less, right? However, there are loan repayment and forgiveness options, as mentioned in the video, such as public service loan forgiveness. So working in certain nonprofit organizations or forms of the government that are local, state, or federal can help you gain eligibility towards public service loan forgiveness. After 10 years, your loans can be forgiven. There's also teacher loan forgiveness. So that same thing, if teachers work in a high need, low resource area, they are eligible for a form of forgiveness, as well as there's income driven loan repayment. So if you don't make that 60K, as I was talking about a moment ago, and you make only, let's say 30K or 20K, they'll adjust that payment so that it's affordable for you to actually handle the loan. And even that has a forgiveness option after 20 or so years, depending on the amount borrowed and the type of loan borrowed. But again, these are only with federal student loans, a privilege unable to be met with private student loans. They're just like credit cards and they will go after you. All right, so real quick, I want to talk about what my Office of Student Scholarships, Grants, and Outreach has done. So this year we appropriated over 140 million of for our 7 state financial aid programs, all for undergraduate students. Most are need-based, and all of which you can find information at our website here at michigan.gov/mystudentaid. So these are the 7 different programs that we offer, but our largest program is the TIP Tuition Incentive Program. So please go to our website and check this out, because I know we are getting low on time. So I want to go ahead and make sure I hustle through and get all this. But all of our programs, you do have to be a Michigan resident, a US citizen, permanent resident, or approved refugee status. Complete a FAFSA, as I've been talking about. Use it at an approved Michigan college or university, enroll at least half-time, whatever half-time is at that college or university, and have graduated from high school, gotten a certificate of completion or its recognized equivalent, as well as meet satisfactory academic progress, known as SAP, institutional standards, which essentially means go to class, pass your classes, and don't take classes not within your program. So as I mentioned earlier, the FAFSA deadline for us is March 1st when it comes to the Michigan Competitive Scholarship and the Michigan Tuition Grant, which we consider you for automatically. These are both need-based programs, and they are based on having a 1200 SAT score. Your FAFSA college order matters. So whatever school in Michigan you decide to put as number 1 on your FAFSA is where we're going to send the money to for any of our state programs. So if whatever you have as number 1 right now is not a in-state college or university, I would suggest updating your FAFSA, or you can go to your student portal or create one by going to our website, or contact us here at this number. I'll have that at the very end as well. But real quick, I want to talk about TIP, Tuition Incentive Program. So students who were identified by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, if they were on Medicaid for 24 out of a 36-month period between the age of 9 and high school graduation. There's no special application needed, but the student does have to graduate from high school prior to turning 20, as well as graduating from earlier middle college if they decide to do that prior to 21. They need to activate their TIP benefits within 4 years of high school completion. And once they activate them, they have up to 10 years before it is forfeited. There's 2 parts or phases to TIP. Phase 1 will, on the shorthand, pay for full tuition at your standard in-district rate at your local community college. So that's why we say go to your local in-district community college, because it'll pay for the in-district rate. And if you're in district, that's full coverage. And then up to $250 in mandatory fees per semester. If you decide to go to a private or independent college, we'll pay the average community college in-district rate, which has been established as $118 per credit hour this year. And so if it's more than that, you would be responsible for the difference, which scholarships and other grants could potentially help with. And then if you decide to go and get your certificate or associate degree at a Michigan public college or university, then we'll pay the lower level resident rate and then up to $250 in mandatory fees. Phase 1 is only for your first certificate or associate degree program. But then assuming that you do utilize that or you don't, and you go right to your 2-year school, phase 2 can assist. But phase 2 only goes up to $500 per semester for up to 2 years. So it essentially has to be completed and consumed within 30 months of either the completion of phase 1 or once you activate TIP. And activate TIP, and as I mentioned, not forfeiting it within 10 years. And then MISSG, that's our website, your student portal, you can get to at michigan.gov/MISSG. And if you have a current year FAFSA or a TIP record, as long as you know your SOCH, you can get to it and create this portal. You can also use this QR code, which I know that with the recording, you'll be able to get back to, but you can also use the link there. And then through that portal, you can pretty much do, everything. Apply for various scholarships and grants, receive important communication information about your award and eligibility, check your eligibility status and the processing of your awards, update your contact information, view your eligibility status, payment status, like did we pay, as well as email us specifically. You can also go to our website. there you can see, this is what our website looks like, and you can click on the Students and Families tab up there, or on the block tile at the bottom there. You'll be able to see all the information about our programs, publications, FAFSA information, our social media information, as well as our scholarship search tool and best practices. And you can also get to the portal sign up. Also, we have our Michigan Scholarship Search Self-Service tool. This allows you to know about any scholarships specific to your county. So please, please, please go to our website and then go to that Students and Families tab and get to our Michigan Scholarship Search Self-Service tool. And then I want to thank you guys for allowing me to speak to you today from My Student Aid, trying to make college accessible, affordable, and attainable. Connect with us on social media at My Student Aid. This is our handle for everything. So we are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And then if you have any questions, I am here, but you can also take a screenshot of this information or a picture, because this is our contact information. But I just want to say thank you so much again for having me.
Good deal. Thank you so much, Felicia. Excellent presentation. You
Oh, thank
guys,
you.
in the chat box, do you have any questions? Or if you like, I can unmute you if you raise your hand. Okay. No questions. So then we will close this and
I do see something in the chat. Oh, no, sorry. Thanks. Oh, how do I say her name? Is it
Jana.
Jana? Okay, I just didn't want to
Yeah.
say it that way and it not be right.
Understood. Understood.
But
Again, great presentation, excellent information. Thank you guys for joining, and we'll see you next time on College and Career Pathways. Everybody have a great day.
awesome. Bye.
Bye, you guys. So Felicia, want to ask you, move the last person. Want to ask you, can I send you, well, no. Can I have you back next semester, the winter semester, once a month like we did this fall semester?
Absolutely. Are the dates in that registration?
Actually, they are not. I haven't created them.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, go ahead and
good
send me
deal.
those dates so then I can just put them on my calendar, because it is pretty open right now. So I can just secure them for you.
Yay. So I'll schedule one a month from January until May.
Okay.
Okay, great. Oh my God. Let me also ask you this. Is Future for Frontliner Scholarship, that's still open?
No, unfortunately, it's not open like application wise.
Okay, okay.
Michigan Reconnect is, though, that's like constant, but it's for people 25 and older.
So Michigan Reconnect will never close down. That scholarship will remain available as long as you're over 25 and did not earn your
First certificate or associates, bachelor's also, but I mean, it's only helping for the certificate associates.
Right, right. Okay.
Yeah, so parents, I think of them all the time for that kind of stuff, for that part, you know.
Absolutely. And that's why I wanted to get clear so that I could tell several of them, because I'm always telling them, like, this is an excellent opportunity. If you never had the chance to, go to school and get your associate's degree or certification, this is a wonderful opportunity for you.
Oh, let me show you. I don't know how oh, am I able to share?
You still are.
Oh, am I? Okay. It said something like host stop sharing. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, that was you. You stopped.
Oh, that's weird. Like it confuses you.
Mm-hmm,
Something like that. Because it's like, are you talking about me? Okay, there we go. There we go. I just kept pushing the wrong arrow. My silly self. Okay. So on this slide in particular, So, I know I didn't talk about this, but most, high school students aren't in default on any federal
Right.
anyway. But Michigan Reconnect scholarship is exempt from that rule. So parents that are in default on any federal student loans can still utilize Reconnect.
Wow. Okay.
Right. And that's what's crazy, because while I was at Schoolcraft, so many students were on default, you know what I mean? Like they hadn't paid the government. And it cracks me up because, you have to not pay the government for 292 days or something, 92 or 93 days. But in order to go into default, so you had to ignore them like almost an entire year before they default you anyway. And usually they're really, they seem really nice about it. Like, okay, well, pay at least this for 6 months and then, you can become eligible again. So that was the most challenging thing, I think, on some level with our system too, because at Schoolcraft, our system's built for federal regulations, not to bypass any of them.
Right.
And so when we were trying to administer Michigan Reconnect, it was like kind of this whole other program all itself that we had to manage, because it's like, they're flagging everything, but it's like, nope, they're eligible for this, so we need to put it on and figure out how to get the system not to
That's
yeah, because the system's like, what? Like, no, this person needs no money.
absolutely.
How everything's programmed. So it's funny.
Okay, good deal. That's excellent. I'm going to put that out there for our students and their families, their parents. Good deal. So I will email you with the dates for next semester, as well as the link for those meetings. The link will be the same for each one.
Okay. And then I was going to say too, like the Michigan Reconnect, I always think about it being very similar to TIP. Like it'll pay their in-district, full tuition and fees.
It's always best if you stay within district. If you go out, it only covers in-district rate, which means you're coming out of pocket.
Yeah.
And I do understand why people go out of district, because some programs aren't just offered at the schools that they are in district for. So, I do get
or they
it.
don't like that school, or unfortunately they might have even already burned their bridge there.
Yeah, that is a possibility as well.
That, I mean, at least that's how I, felt, when I was at Schoolcraft, is like, I'd suggest even, like, because they'd be so mad, because it was $56. It was the difference between in-state versus, or county versus out of county, right? So that's what they were out of pocket, or they needed to secure a scholarship or something. And they're like, what? This is ridiculous. Like, you are my closest, and sometimes were, but sometimes it was like Henry Ford, was closer to them, and they're like, I'm gonna go there.
Yeah. Absolutely. I understand completely. Thank you again. I'll be in touch with you.
Always.
Definitely before Christmas break. When do you break for Christmas?
Oh, I think that Thursday before.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be in touch.
So I think that's the 23rd, right?
I'll be in touch with you before then.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you so much, Felicia.
You're welcome, Tony.
Have a great rest of your week.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of this time until the next holiday.
Indeed. Bye now.
Bye.